Let's go ahead and get started. I'm Carrie Bourne. I'm from the Office of Continuing Education at UW-Whitewater, and we have been hosting the Fairhaven Lecture Series here at Fairhaven and online since 1983. So we're thrilled to be back here this fall. This fall, we're talking to some of our science faculty, and they're going to share some of their research with you. We've got a wide range of topics from our faculty in the sciences, everything from a lecture on the COVID vaccine to next week we'll talk about northern cardinals. So lots of great science-related topics for you this fall. But today we have a professor from the Department of Geology, Geography, and Environmental Science. Juk Bhattacharya is a professor of geology at UW-Whitewater. She received her PhD from the University of Minnesota in 2000. Her research interests include structural geology and geoscience education. She teaches all the lecture and laboratory sections of the large enrollment introductory geology courses for non-majors every semester, and also teaches upper-level core courses in mineralogy, petrology, and structural geology. Since joining UW-Whitewater, she has developed 2 new courses titled Volcanoes and Geology and Physics of Iceland, and revised the existing environmental geology course to promote earth science education among 9 non-science majors. She has co-led faculty development programs on infusing research in the courses and is an active participant in the geoscience education community. She conducts cross-disciplinary collaborative research with her colleagues in physics, chemistry, and computer science, as well as with those in humanities and linguistics. Her current research on landslide monitoring has received the 2020 Regents Scholar Award from the UW system. Please welcome Juk.
Thank you. It's really great to be here in a room with people. Yeah, the whole year I've been talking to my computer and just sending out, is there anybody there already? But this is just like I'm in the same room with people, so this is great. And thank you for having me. This is like the Fairhaven Lecture is one of the most prestigious presentations that we get to do to share our work with people. So is the sound okay? Can everybody hear me? Can everybody understand me? Okay, good. The mask and English, they get filtered. So what I'm going to talk about today, this is something really new that we are doing on our campus, and the project that we are doing is actually kind of new in the entire world. So this is one of the real cutting edge research that we are doing here. And so if you have any questions or anything, feel free to kind of stop and ask, because this is still in the development stage, and this is very exciting. So the title looks pretty big. We are trying to figure out a way to monitor when slopes fall down. Yeah, gravity works, it's the law, and we know we cannot go against gravity, but when slopes fall down, things get destroyed. This picture right here, this is from China. So you can see the slope falling onto the buildings down here. And this happens all over the world. And in our campus, we are working together. My colleague, Oscar Yavusetin from physics, and he's one of the speakers coming in one of the future projects presentations that he'll talk about how he uses interdisciplinary approaches for his project. We also have a computer scientist, Haijian Sun, and a group of students, Brett, Peyton, are in geology, they're working with me. Nick, Gabe, they're in physics. I have an art major. Yeah, when I say interdisciplinary, I'm not kidding. She has never taken a geology class at all, but she's working with us because we need everybody's to use this, to develop this. And Michaela, she's just graduated. She's gone to grad school in Utah right now. So that's our current student group, student or researchers and us. And we are working on developing this. Now you know why you're working on this, right? This is from Kenosha. Yeah. And this photo is not that long ago. It's like 2019, 20. This is Lake Michigan. And this building is getting a really good view of the lake. There is another photo where you can actually see through the basement, like the walls have fallen down. So this happens in everywhere in the world. I show the first picture was in China, but I'll show a lot more picture along the Lake Michigan shoreline, the bluffs, both in Michigan side and the Wisconsin side. It's mostly sand, these bluffs. And these slopes, this bluff, are liable to fall. It could be a lot more moisture in the soil, so from rainfall. It could be the wave action, weathering, erosion. Now I'm gonna show a video of what is happening. So I'm gonna quit out of here and go to this video. Let me get the sound.
When the house first fell in, everyone's initial reaction was shock. But now it's all about putting together a plan of action, specifically trying to figure out how to clean up the mess before it gets washed away into Lake Michigan.
It's not their fault. I think everything that's going on is an act of God.
On the lakeshore, a new decade has brought new dilemmas. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Not on the lakeshore, no. This is the first to me. I've been doing this 48 years. I've never had a call like this.
The call came in New Year's Day. That's when contractor David Callender was told the Muskegon County home he'd been working on had fallen in. For months, Callender had been working with the homeowner to secure the cottage, but the rising waters and extreme winds had them beat.
This wind just like this. But when your house is hanging out, now you got a swirl with the wind. And it's just taking the sand right off underneath the house.
The aftermath looking like this.
Got some walls cracked and broke up. It's not salvageable. The house is gone.
Now it's up to the homeowner, Tish Ganser, to clean up the mess. She says Callender is one of the contractors she's considering for the job.
We have equipment. We'll reach right over, put cables, pull that thing right up on top, smash it down, put them in dumpsters.
So that would be your plan of attack?
That will, the only plan of attack you can do.
He says they need to act quickly, as in the next few days. Something county officials second, saying the more time that passes, the more likely the house will be swallowed whole by Lake Michigan, an environmental nightmare they're hoping to avoid. As the waves and wind continue to eat away at the shore, the homeowner is trying to find financing for the job, telling News 8 insurance likely won't cover it, leaving it up to her to foot what could be a $10,000 bill.
And it's sad. You'd think that somebody, the government or somebody, would step in and help these people.
Officials with the county tell me their priority is keeping everyone safe, which means limiting the number of people that come through this area. Yesterday, they put up this caution tape, and just today, they barricaded off the road that leads to here. Reporting near Montague, Jacqueline Francis, News 8.
So that's the type of issues that we are addressing with our project. And this is getting worse with climate change, getting more rainfall. Then the lake level is rising. This year, 2021, is when the lake levels are going slightly below, like it's almost at the normal. But the last couple of years, 2019 and 2020, the Lake Michigan was at all-time high. The higher you get the lake level, the more rainfall it happens, the wind picks up. Those buildings that are built maybe not on the lake when they started, but the bluffs get eroded, and we have a model on, like this is our students, and I've been created. And I'm gonna come to that one, but I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint. So we got excessive rainfall, we get weathering and erosion, and the lake, and the more people keeps building on the bluff, you have more weight on the bluff, things start to go down, literally. So we get these kind of pictures, and you have more people building on the bluffs, global climate change, you're getting more rainfall. So what we wanna do is we wanna monitor this. We wanna send people, give people the information that they need, that before the houses fall down, that this is happening, this is a chance in a couple months or in a few weeks, your house may be in danger, please leave or do something about it, or maybe not build. So that's where our project is going, that we are monitoring how the slopes are behaving with extra water. Another thing that happens in Lake Michigan is freeze thaw. In winter, water freezes in cracks. The cracks become wider because ice pushes them over. Then in summer, ice melts and the whole thing becomes weak. So we are trying to deal with what are the different factors that makes those slopes weaker, and can we monitor them, and can we come up to that point where you shouldn't be there? You have to get out or do something about it. So the model that we have, and this is another video that we made. This is what our students and I are working together on this. So we are modeling Lake Michigan here. We are basically playing with sand and water and calling it research. Yeah, my students love it. So we modeled, this is sand with some pebbles mixed in there. We got the Monopoly houses in there, and some developer. What's my students talking? Sorry. How the pebbles. They don't mind me. So this granite slab represents the big, like some big building, like a housing complex that they built because nice view. And these houses are already there, even though they're pretty far away from the bluff. And then you have waves hitting those bluffs. I'll let my student Mikila do the wave. So the first part of the bluff falls down, and you start undercutting it. Are you even seeing this? Wait a second. I'm seeing something on my computer, and this is not moving. So it's like, gonna escape. And now you can probably see this. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'm watching this, but this thing doesn't move. You see how waves are actually undercutting the whole slab? So when you have constant Lake Michigan waves hitting those bluffs, like the first video showed how the house fell over, and we are modeling this. The underside of the bluffs fall down, and then the entire bluff just becomes unstable. Come on, do it. You can see the cracks developing right at the line of the houses. And the big granite slab is still far away from the bluff, but now the bluff's gone. So now that's close to the bluff. So the bluffs actually gets eroded. And even though you build something far away from the lake, eventually the lake just picks up and it starts cutting into the sand. and you have more and more waves. The waves happen more on winter time than in the summertime. Yeah. So that's a good representation of what happens. Well, we did it in less than 2 minutes, but you give it like about a decade or 15 to 20 years, all the area, all the houses built next to the bluff, this is what's likely to happen. So that gave us our problem, like what can we do about it? Can we monitor the rate at which it is moving? Can we figure out a way to let people know that which areas are dangerous? Or best case scenario, can you protect the bluffs in a way that it doesn't happen or is less likely to happen? So that's the whole premise of our research, that we're trying to avoid these kind of situations. This is something a single discipline cannot handle by itself. As a geologist, I know a lot about rocks and erosion and how sand behaves, but I don't have a mechanism to measure the rate at which things happen. So I went and talked with my physics colleague, the electronics person, Dr. Yavusatin, who came up with sensors to sense how much moisture and temperature and all those things in soil. And we teamed up with Dr. Haijian Sun to use a prototype multimodal sensing device. Multimodal meaning it is sensing not just one, but multiple things. And that's capable of measuring what changes are happening in the soil. So you're using Raspberry Pi. It's a computer. It took me a while to figure out Raspberry Pi is not something I can eat. Yeah, first few meetings we had with physics and computer science, there was this learning thing like that, talking about putting electronics in a pie. Okay. This is what a pie looks like in their mind. This is the computer, and it has sensors that you can stick your sensors in there. So you can have temperature sensors that look like these. And then you have moisture sensor. You probably have seen something like this for like putting your plants in there. Like they usually use them for putting in your plant, and it measures how much water is in the plant. And if it doesn't have enough water, it beeps and something puts more water in there. So they use that for gardening, that you don't have to do anything, that the machine take care of it. We are using that to figure out how much water goes through sand in this capacitive moisture sensors. So it just changes the capacitance to a voltage value. As of right now, one of my students is actually using this to figure out the rate of water movement in the lab. This is what the pie looks like. This is what's supposed to call a pie plate. Yeah. You tell me pie plate, I think Thanksgiving, but not really. So they have a version 3 or 4, and they have multiple digital and analog sensors. What we are trying to do is not just temperature and moisture sensors, but also other sensors like strain gauge. So if a part of the sand is pulling apart, can we figure that out, that there is tension in the sand that may not have anything to do with water? It might be something else. So we have a bunch of other sensors in there. This is my colleague's invention, creating a bin, a plastic bin that's waterproof, bug-proof. For electronic people, that's something they need to worry about, that no bug or no water gets in there. For me, like if you don't get water, then what are you doing outside? But yeah, they made a nice little vent it's vented, so the temperature doesn't go too high when you're putting it out in the sun. We are also powering them with solar chargers. These are some of the other sensors we're planning to put in. So this sensor right here is something that you have in your car. So when you're parking your car and the bumper gets too close to the car next to you, it starts beeping. So that's this sensor. For us, this will be like figuring out distance. So if part of the slope is falling away from you, if the distance between 2 points change, it'll send us data. We need a real-time clock and GPS so we can measure exact time how things are changing. Otherwise, if you cannot monitor, if you don't know what time it is, things are happening. This one is my favorite. That changes the pull between two parts in a bluff. So if one part is falling down, there's a distance between them is increasing. You can feel the pull as part of the sensor that's sensing. A lot of these things don't happen all at once. They start creeping, move slowly that human beings can't perceive, but those equipment can. And when this creep starts, we are hoping to get some information from the sensors to send city council leaders or first responders to stop the movement before it starts, maybe change something, change the slope, or build walls or some ways of making things not become a devastating loss. So that's our kind of goal, to have best possible combination of sensors that gives us the best data that we can use to tell people when there is a danger or everything is safe, or which part of the bluff might be more unstable than other parts. So we are working, this is Nick, this is one of our computer science students, working in the whole, getting the coding properly done. So we are individually testing the sensors, putting them into the architecture. We are planning to have mix and match. So if one sensor is redundant, we can take it out and put something else in its space. So things, Lake Michigan would be different if we apply the same principle to China or Puerto Rico or Washington State. They may not have, like Puerto Rico may not have freeze and thaw. They may not have any ice and snow forming there. So temperature sensor may not be a good thing to have in there, but something else might be. So we are making our prototype much more flexible so we can apply it situation to situation. And the computer science people are testing and developing the code for new sensors, making a library. So that's the coding side of it. What my students are doing, we are field testing the whole sensor. These students are actually working, they're not lying on the grass. He's actually typing in the code and she's giving him the information of the GPS. So it looks like they're just sitting there hanging out, but they are actually working. They made sure to tell me that. I put the photos in like this. No, that looks like I'm just sitting there. Like, no, I'll tell you. So we have this little plastic bin in here where we are putting it out in the field and making sure that nothing gets in and the temperature inside stays at a reasonable way so you can vent it. Because otherwise, if the temperature goes over 80 out there, then the computer will shut down. So you're gonna try to avoid that. So we tested it on our campus, going outside, seeing if we can measure water in the grass and on rock. And we also took it to somebody's farm field to measure if we can put it out there overnight, which didn't work. It shut down. Yeah, some squirrel or something got in there. So no, so we are kind of animal proofing. Yeah. But we haven't been able to go out and do field work because of COVID, because this happened right when everything got shut down, so they couldn't go out and knock on people's door and, hey, can you leave it in your backyard for overnight or something? So what we have been doing is working in our lab. So we have sandboxes, huge tubs of box with sand. This one we used Sandtastic, which is play sand, no silica dust or little silica dust, so my students don't get silicosis. And we put the moisture sensors in the sandbox at different spots, and we are looking to see if we can measure how water moves through the sand. Can we check the rate? Can we figure out any way that how much water is moving that can lead to a landslide or something like that? So that's a setup. And we are monitoring, we are making freeze-thaw, so winter, freezing, summer, thawing, by pouring liquid nitrogen in the sandbox. So this is a FLIR thermal image. These are the two holes where we put liquid nitrogen in there. That's like negative 60 degrees. It's pretty cold. So we put the temperature sensors in there, and our hypothesis is when water freezes, more water comes towards the cold spot. And when more water comes to the cold spot, that makes the sand weak, because sand with water will be much less strong than not so wet sand. So that's kind of what we are monitoring to see if we can measure how water moves. And this is the data we got. This is very preliminary. But what we are seeing is when the temperature drops in those holes, the moisture sensors, the voltage also drops, which implies there is more moisture coming in. So we do see some correlation between when you drop the temperature, there is some water movement. We still don't know if the water is enough to make the slopes weak. So a little bit of water won't do anything to the sand, but a lot of water will make them go away. Now, we're trying to measure if the water that is coming into the slope because of temperature, is it enough to cause a landslide? So this is the current stage of the work. Right now, my students just set up the sandbox to figure out just exactly how much water you need to put in to make sure that enough water goes in to cause a landslide. So this is where we are right now in this. We are also looking at if we can get the water to come up from bottom. So we have groundwater. Can it come up to the slope? We did manage to get a slope failure happen. The top part is ice. So that water freezing, making ice, we can actually manage to destabilize the slope in a lab condition. So there are some data that you got that can be applied to real life situations. When you actually break something, fall down, it's a happy day in the lab. Oh, I love breaking things. So this is how my students work. They work together and they set up the sandbox, and we are modeling those, like in the sandbox, in the computer. We are modeling those slope. We're making sure the slope's steep enough, and we're adding things. So in this model, you can see there is a little ledge of ice that we created here. Now that ledge broke, and the whole thing fell down. So this is the data that we're looking for, so we can take it from the lab into the real world, and we can figure out how much of this is applicable for making our monitor, making our sensors, to take the data that you're creating in the lab to apply in the field. So yeah, that was one of our good days when it actually did a slump, just like it does in real life. We are also looking at different grain sizes. So you can see the size of the sand particles are different. We changed them just to show that in real world, the slopes are not built with play sand, Sandtastic that people buy. So now we are using real sand that we see out in the field. We are also modeling the lake. So we got these groins around the Lake Michigan area. You got those groins and those, where they dock their boats that parallel to the slope. And they make really interesting things with the water current. So we got a little fan hooked up there, and we are making waves, wind waves coming parallel to the sand, and seeing how that, with the groins that we have, that can change the whole setup of lake erosion. That human actions along the lake, can they control erosion, or how do they control, and can we do anything about it? So these are some of the other models that we're working on. My students are going to present their research to a national level professional conference in about 2 weeks. So yeah, this research seems like pretty simple, like we're just playing with sand and water, but these are the applications. This is in Port Washington, and we have been working with the township in summer. So this was something that we just started after the COVID, like we could travel as on university business because of the pandemic. This is their beach. Well, whatever is left. This bluff is eroding badly. So this road used to be the beach access road. Now you can see the bluff kind of covered it up. That happened last year. So this whole bluff is slowly falling down, and they have a park, a really nice park for children with the physical disabilities. So they want to protect their park. That's one of a kind in the nation. But the whole bluff is falling down, and they're afraid that they're going to lose the park. So I am working with them, it's my students and I, to have ways to figure out what can they do to stop the bluff erosion and protect their parks. So that's where we are using our data. So we are using our sandbox data to tell them about the bluff angle. These bluffs are pretty steep. This is about 60 degrees slope, which is really steep. So we are suggesting that they not just cut it back, but they make stair steps. So terrace it out. So if anything falls down, the terrace layers will catch it. So the bluff won't go into the lake. Also add more native plants, long roots to hold the bluff together. That doesn't need some hard stabilization. Maybe have some kind of a ramp as a structure to hold the bluff together, and also for people to go down all the way to the beach, because they have 6 stairs, like long stairs. And if you are not 20-something like my students, it takes a while to climb up and down. So the beach is not accessible. The other thing that's on the beach, I took my students on a field trip. They have fun. You see, the bluff itself, the area that is falling down, have no vegetation. That makes things really unstable. Vegetation holds the soil back, but if you don't have any root system holding the sand back, things can start falling down. You can see that these areas, the surface, the rainwater made some really deep gullies. And that can change the slope stability. What's happening in these areas, this is mud, not even sand. So rainwater can't go through it. So it cannot go underground, join the groundwater. So it's just going on top of it, taking the mud with it and make these gullies. And that makes the erosion just pick up. And once you get the surface erosion going, eventually the slope being gentle, it becomes steeper and steeper with the surface erosion. And then the whole thing becomes weak. It starts getting undercut with the lake waves coming and taking out the sand from the bottom. So it's kind of a two-set problem, erosion happening from top with rainwater and being cut by the lake motions there. So that's the things that we are working on right now. The next steps, we're going to test and calibrate different sensors to make sure that the data we're getting from the lab can be applied in the field, make some kind of a model, so we know exactly at what number value things are weak or strong. We are identifying what other sensors can be needed. We got moisture and temperature. We also got strain gauge and tilt meters for measuring angles, distance calibration. What else is needed? Now that COVID is kind of letting up, we need to field test so we can actually go out and do field work and travel together. So that's kind of where we are right now. And at this point, I'll take questions or comments, suggestions, and I do want to acknowledge the Regent Scholar Grant Award that funded the whole project, that's still funding the project, and the city to working with us, and of course my team, the Sandpit crew. Thank you.
Is the erosion worse on the Michigan or the Wisconsin shore?
Oh boy. I'd. Oh, the question was, is the erosion worse on the Wisconsin or Michigan side? And my answer is, oh boy. Since I'm on the Wisconsin side, I'll say it's worse in Michigan. But they might disagree.
How about other lakes? Other Great Lakes?
Lake Superior's got most of them are rock. The erosion is happening everywhere. It's not like that is only happening in Lake Michigan side, but the sand bluffs are more erodible than the rock cliffs that are out there. But I recently saw a video of picture rocks. The entire rock cliff just fell off. So it's happening everywhere. I'd kind of say Lake Michigan, though, because there are more people around the Lake Michigan side than Lake Superior side. So it's impacting infrastructure and buildings along the Lake Michigan more than anywhere else. But it's happening everywhere.
I lived on the south shore of Lake Michigan, about a block from the beach, so for about 70 years. So my feeling about what's going on as the lake seems to be going south as well as east and west is it's kind of going back to where it was when it was, what was it, the old Lake Wisconsin? It's sort of going back to where it began, which is about 6 or 7 miles from the edge of the lake, maybe a little bit longer, along Route 30 or around Ridge Road south of Gary. And some of this is very natural.
Yep.
That it happens. And for instance, in my time, the beach on the south shore south of Lake Michigan has gone inward and eventually gets to where the sand has been deposited and can create these bluffs.
Mm-hmm.
And people feel that they have built their houses back far enough, but it turns out the lake is indomitable.
Yep.
It's going to get there in spite of whatever you can do.
Yeah.
It feels to me that the lake is getting, well, of course, it fills up and
You are absolutely right. It is natural. So erosion has been happening since the lake started, and there is no way I can stop erosion. It's people building next to the lakes are kind of in the way of the danger. Like if you build in a floodplain, then you're putting yourself at risk. So the urbanization, people building, some people say, I just love the view. Like pretty soon you're going to have too good a view. And so that's kind of where we are coming in, and there is no way we can stop the erosion. We can tell people that this is happening faster or slower and to get out of there. But stopping erosion, no, it's natural. And that lake level rising and falling is natural. We just don't know how fast it is happening, especially.
It's a lot of water to raise just an inch. When you think about
The rainfall is increased a lot. Like only recently, like I heard like a couple weeks ago that the lake level hasn't changed. But 2019 and 2020, that all the Great Lakes, the level of the Great Lakes went up. And now it is slowly coming down. So the lakes are going to do what they're going to do. We got to deal with it. And
So this would impact future building, that the research then maybe can say, well, you can't build this close to the lake. Eventually, if it gets worse enough, you won't see the lake. I mean, there'll be bluffs that you have to preserve those bluffs, because otherwise.
so, yeah, this research, a big part of this research, the question again was the research is more about building, guiding the building as opposed to anything with the bluff. So, yeah, this is a worldwide issue, these slopes falling down. Last month, there was a news in news that I saw. I'm from India, so I watch Indian news. A big glacier in the Himalayas apparently broke and went directly onto a power plant. And people are working in the power plant, so anybody that went to work that day didn't get back home. Yeah, and I was mad because you could see what's happening on a satellite image, that the glacier is creeping and slowly, and it's, a molten glacier ice is not going to hold the rocks together, right? So they shouldn't have built the power plant so right below a glacier. Now, somebody would have told them that, right? That don't build there. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. Don't build in places where things can happen, may not be today, 20 years from now. They recently got a report that the HUD are building houses on floodplains knowingly from 2016 to 2020. And then Hurricane Ida or something like that happens, and people just lose their investment, their mortgage, their insurance, and all those. So I have an issue with that. So that's why I'm trying to get this monitoring things, like put it in the soil, see how the soil is behaving, if you're getting more water, or if something is changing from year to year, or if this area is going to be vulnerable coming down. So you want to do something about it. So that's what the research is going, and that's why you're working with the city of Port Washington and bringing in people, the students who are in entrepreneurship or real estate and graphic design, so we could tell people like, no, this is what's happening. This is what you should be doing. So, yeah.
Kind of in the future with this research, will there be sensors they can just put in the ground at various distances to find out what's happening?
That is the goal. You're trying to get this is a prototype. So Nobody in the whole planet tried to do this. So we are doing this prototype at like 3 blocks down on our lab. But the whole goal is we'll have this prototype module, put it in the ground, we'll have the data set up, or not to us, but maybe have the data be sent to some agency, or maybe have an app. Everybody does apps. So you can click on your cell phone and see the data, how it is changing, and figure out what's happening in your township or your subdivision. So that's the whole big picture goal right now.
Just gonna make a statement from structural engineer by trade, and years ago I was working with properties near the Hobnobbers from, if I'm familiar with that, on my township. And a number of the properties selling to people, ultimately, they're all trying to sell a property to somebody else and get that out of there. That's the only solution at the time. Even if you spend a lot of money on a property, the people from north and south, if you didn't spend it, it's gonna be washed out besides anyway. Solutions are down there. Move.
Yeah.
If you sell it to somebody else, go ahead.
Then it becomes somebody else's problem. One of the teams in Madison is working on that. We talked with an engineer, and he making the model in his computer model is to have little wave breaker, like speed bumps on the lake shore, so kind of cut down the energy of the waves that are coming in. So have a bunch of speed bumps so the bluffs are not getting impacted as much, and kind of channelize the wave action to away from the houses. But he asked me, like, do you even know how much money you are talking about here? And I'm like, I don't even want to guess. So yeah, small townships are just getting, how much property tax do you even have to build something on the lake shore? But a lot of these towns depends on tourists. So if you don't have a beach, the tourists are not going to come, so they're not going to spend money in the restaurants and other things, so the whole economy kind of goes down because they don't have the beach. So we do need to kind of protect the bluffs in a way that people come and spend the money so you can build better. So there is so much, all these things, little things come together. This whole theme is society, science, and society. This is kind of an example how everything kind of come together and solve a problem and make it so we leave something for my students to build. They need to build their houses too, and they're like, don't build there.
That sounds like a good place to leave it, I think. I'll take the mic quick and say thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this lecture today. I want to also share that Juke's colleague that she works on the sensors with, he will be part of the lecture series here in the next couple of weeks. So I've left schedules out on the table. If you don't have a schedule, you can see what we have coming up here in the next couple of weeks. I also would like you to just hang here for a minute because Brian has a couple of announcements. But before he does those, could you please join me in thanking Juke for her presentation today? Thank you, everyone.